thank you everyone for showing up. My name is Ayub Yusuf, and I started working at Black Hills Information Security about 6 months ago. And I had a question. I was like, what are we seeing most common in our reports? And as I dug through the reports, which is one of the best ways to learn, by the way, if you end up getting a cybersecurity job, it's like you should look at the old stuff that they were doing. It's a great education. I started seeing a lot of findings that were related to cryptographic issues, either directly due to like weak transport layer security, or like indirectly, like derivatives of cryptographic, like not you wouldn't call it a cryptographic failure, but essentially it is. Um, like a stolen password or guest credentials. So yeah. So the first part to understand cryptography is you got to understand encoding. So encoding is how we transmit information. So I'm encoding right now when I'm speaking to you, but computers also have their own languages, so they can understand the inputs that they receive. So if you look on that right, that string might look like gibberish to you because we're not familiar in our day-to-day lives with base 64. We are more familiar with something like base 10. So we all learned base 10 in grade school. It is 0 through 9. Base 64 is 0 through 9, all the lowercase letters, all the uppercase letters, and two special characters, usually an A and a forward slash. And there's also optional padding depending on whether it fits. So that's what that equal sign shows. When you're dealing with encoding challenges, like in a CTF, or you see some base 64 on the client's website, you can use a tool called CyberChef to dig into it further. So let me switch over to CyberChef. Oh, that's tiny. Let's make it big. All right. So here is that same string in CyberChef. So a couple of things about CyberChef. First of all, you should probably not Bing it. For some reason, there's this link that I don't know what it goes to, but that's not the CyberChef you're looking for. The one you are looking for is the github.io page. And as you can see here, this is the tool made by GCHQ. GCHQ is the British intelligence agency. It's analogous to the NSA. The way CyberChef works is you add an input here. Oh, here's another tip. You can go into the options and you set it to dark mode, which some people love. So CyberChef has an input field here. It has a recipe, which is a collection of these operations that they categorize here, and the output is produced here. So if we think this is base 64, we can go and search from base 64 to get it. See, it says hello world. Pretty easy. We can also chain together these decoding tools to create some pretty complex operations. But I also wanted to point out another pro tip. You see that little wand that appeared? If CyberChef understands the input you provided, it will go ahead and try to decode it for you, which is a really neat feature. So if you ever see that wand pop up, then you know that you got something. You might have something. But you can also use magic. Magic is a pretty cool tool because it just kind of brute forces it based off of what you think it might be. So I just added magic and it said, hey, look, this is probably basics hello world. But it also adds a bunch of other ones that aren't right, but you know, it might help you. You can also add a crib, which is in cryptography a known plaintext. So back in the day during World War II, one of the ways they broke the Enigma cipher was using a known crib. So every day they would publish the weather in a very specific format. So knowing the weather, they could figure out, they could use that to try to derive the key for the day. Another cool thing about CyberChef is that there are communities that publish really cool recipes to do all sorts of cool stuff. So here's a recipe that decodes some encode, extracts all the base 64 from a file, but there's so much. Like some of these are really neat. So here's like, hey, I want to extract URLs from some virus obfuscated Visual Basic script, you can just find this recipe, copy it, and dump it into CyberChef, and it will load all those functions, operations it needs to do the function. So there's a whole community out there publishing these. So that makes it a pretty powerful tool. Another thing is that, well, some people, we'll just leave that for later. So here's CyberChef. Yeah, we covered everything. Don't use Bing. and let's talk about hashing. So CyberChef also does hashing, but hashing is used to uniquely identify any given input. So it's basically the fingerprint for files. So if I give it a file, it gives me this fingerprint. And if I give it the file again, it gives me the same fingerprint. A good hashing algorithm has unique and rare and unpredictable collisions. So I realized I didn't explain collisions. Collisions are when a hashing algorithm produces the same output for any given input. So if I give it one input and it gives me, I don't know, 1, and I give it a different input and it also gives me 1, that is a collision and that is bad. A lot of people, me included, thought that you don't want your hashing algorithm to have any collisions whatsoever. It turns out that's impossible. It is a foregone conclusion that every hashing algorithm has collisions. As long as they're rare and unpredictable, they're usually okay. Notice some of these are listed in red. Anything that I highlight in red are hashing algorithms or encryption algorithms that seem to have some problems that aren't considered to be the most secure option out there now. Another thing to remember about hashing, so MD4 is considered an insecure hashing algorithm, so is MD5. Another thing about hashing to remember is that hashing also is irreversible. And this makes sense if you think about it. If I give input 20 gigabytes to a file, to a hashing algorithm, and get like a 40-character string out of it, obviously I lost an enormous amount of data. So I won't know how to turn it back to what it was because I lost data during the transformation. And again, here's some hashing algorithm examples. We got MD4. And the only reason I included MD4 is that's how NT hashes, which are the default password hashes on Windows, are stored. There's also MD5, which stands for Message Digest 5. And then the SHA family. So there's SHA-1, SHA-2, SHA-3, and so on. So let's go to the next example. So if you're using a website, and let's say you go to your website and you go and you put in your password real carefully, and it says it's wrong, and then you're like, dang it. And then you go in, and you put it even more carefully, and it says it's wrong. You're like, okay, whatever, I forgot it. And you click your forget your password, and it sends back to you your password. You should have an oh crap moment at that point, because what that tells you is their website is storing their passwords in plain text. And the great people on Tumblr, I guess, have collected a list of websites that have offended this principle that a lot of people take for granted, that websites hash your passwords before storing them. So we can go to the GitHub offender list, and we can see that they've collected over 5,000 websites that have evidence that they're storing your passwords insecurely. That's the New Yorker. New Yorker, is that the magazine? And so is that Virgin Mobile? So some of these are big companies. They should probably know not to do that. And ultimately, this is why people encourage the use of password managers. You can have a really strong password, but if it's not unique, it's only a matter of time until it ends up on one of these websites. RockU. So RockU is the most common dictionary used for password cracking. The company, it's named after the company that it's from. RockU was a company that developed widgets for MySpace. So for those who don't know, MySpace was a social media site that dominated the internet for a really long time. It allowed you to have a lot of customization on your profile. You could, have bright, vivid colors all over your background. You could blast your favorite song on your profile, and best of all, you could publicly rank your friends in the top 10 list. Because of an SQL injection, RockU ended up having a data breach that exposed the passwords for 14 some odd people, 14 million some odd people. And the interesting thing about this, and the reason I wanted to talk about this, is because people aren't random number generators. The passwords in RockU had a lot of duplicates, and the list is sorted by the most common passwords. So a lot of the times when we evaluate how secure a website is or how secure a password is, we might assume that people are more random than they are when we have seen them use common passwords all the time, like the current season and the year with an exclamation point at the end, if they need a special character. And the other reason I wanted to include this is hackers know people aren't random, so they don't try to brute force passwords. They're not going hashing the number 1, seeing the results, comparing it to what's in the database, and then hashing the number 2, seeing the results, comparing it to what's in the database. They use password lists because people tend to accumulate towards one of those more common phrases. So here's a graphic from secure.org, and it shows how long it takes a password to crack based off of the complexity and based off of the characters. So as the complexity in the characters increase, the passwords become harder and harder to crack. But I want you to pay attention to point A. At 11 characters, using all lowercase, uppercase letters, at least one uppercase letters, it'll take around 5 years to crack. But if you add a number to that, it goes up almost 10 times to 41 years. But notice if you add another character, it goes from 5 to 300. So the point that this is illustrating is that while the numbers on the chart will change based off of the hashing algorithm, based off of the compute resources, the relationship between these numbers won't. You get an exponentially strong increase in your password strength if you use passwords of longer and longer length. That's why at BHIS, we recommend our customers use 15 characters. And we'll talk about why we chose 15 in particular later, but that is ultimately the purpose. So like, even if there isn't that many complexity requirements, it's well beyond 1,000 years if they're just using lowercase letters to crack. So here's Have I Been Pwned. I'll actually show it instead of making us. So Have I Been Pwned is a project curated by Troy Hunt, and he not only collected the password data breaches for for a single breach like RockU, but all of the breaches, and he stored them with the user accounts they're associated with. So you can use his website, to check if your username or email address appears anywhere in those lists. So we can do that right now. So this is my BHIC email, blackhillsinfosec.com. You can see if I've been pwned. Okay, no, I have not been pwned. That's good. I've only worked here for 6 months. That would be embarrassing. But as you can see, there's millions and millions of credentials in here. And that's pretty common. And you can set up notifications. So you can go here and you can make sure Troy emails you if he sees you in a new data breach. But the cool thing is you can do these domain searches. So if you can prove that you own a domain address like whitecyberdoc.com, you can tell them, hey, if you see any email address associated with this domain in any of your data breaches, please send me that and let me know, because it's time to rotate those credentials. All right. So let's talk about how passwords are stored on the operating system. So here is what would have originally been the Etsy password file. Back in the good old days, but back in the day, well before my time, Linux did not store the passwords, or stored all the passwords, in a file called Etsy password. At first, I believe they didn't even encrypt it. Eventually, they realized it's a bad idea. They started encrypting their passwords, or hashing their passwords. And then they eventually realized it being in the Etsy password file was problematic in and of itself. Because of how Linux is made, the Etsy password file has to be readable by all the users. And it's because those two things at the bottom, at the end, it tells you what shell it uses, it tells you your home directory, and tells you other information about the user. And so you have to know what the Etsy password, you have to be able, every user has to be able to read it. So let's talk about the format. So at the beginning, as you can see, there's the username. And then you have the hashing algorithm. So see, notice the $$Y$. That associates to yes script. That EJ or that J9T, that is instructions to the yes script algorithm. I think it's like the number of rounds. And then after that, there's the salt. So a salt is something that you add to a password to prevent the same input from ending up in the same output. So every user on a Linux system will have a different salt, so that even if two users have the same password, you will never be able to tell. And then after that, there's the hash password. And then those zeros, those double zeros are actually really important. I wish I labeled them. The first zero tells you it's the UID of 0. And that's actually what defines root more than the name root. And that's the group ID, which is also 0. And then it goes on to the home directory and the shell. But I created this little cheat sheet, and I use this all the time because it helps me find the most common algorithms that I see on Linux systems, which are MD5. If that Y was a 1, then I would know this is an MD5 hash, and I would use mode 500 on a Hashcat, the password cracking tool, or MD5 crypt on John the Ripper to crack that. Blowfish is a little different. There's a wild card there. And with that wild card, it might be an A, it might be a B, it might be a Y. Doesn't matter. Probably with Blowfish, you should try Hashcat mode 3200. And then finally, or bcrypt, and so on and so forth. The final one, yesscrypt, as far as I can tell, I couldn't find a mode in Hashcat. By the way, yesscrypt is the default hashing algorithm on Kali Linux. So if you cat out your Etsy shadow, you would see yesscrypt hashes. I can't find it in Hashcat at all. I tried. It wasn't there. If you guys find it, please DM me or email me. I showed you my email. Just show it to me. I would love to see that. As the root user, you can just cat out the file. You don't need to do anything else if you have that permissions. That is in opposition to Windows. So Windows, the hashes on Windows look a little different. So that first character is the UID, the user ID administrator. Obviously, this is the built-in admin on the account. The RID is the second number. That's the relative ID. And the RID for the built-in administrator account is always 500. Sometimes I see people say stuff like, oh, we should change the built-in administrator's account name so, the hackers will be tricked. But you can't change that relative ID, so I don't know how helpful that will be. The next thing is the landman hash. And this is actually an empty landman hash. And I'll show you to demonstrate that later. But that's actually a good sign right there. If I saw anything other than that AAD3 string, that would be a finding. Because that means on that system, landman hashes are enabled. And the reason why BHIS recommends 15 characters for our passwords is so that those landman hashes aren't stored. While landman hashes are hashes, it is a really bad hashing algorithm because it's effectively 2 7-character passwords. And if you think back to that chart, a 7-character password cracks like in a day, no matter the complexity. So the way landman works is if your password 7, it splits your password, hashes both ends, and then combines it together. And if you end up cracking it with John or something, it'll actually tell you, it actually same cases it too. So it's even worse because capital letters and lowercase letters are treated the same. So it makes the password hash even worse. Yeah, so landman, it's a bad sign, and it is trivial to break. Moving on to NT hashes, and as we talked about NT hashes, it is an MD4 message digest 4 UTF-16 little Indian encoded password. And again, I created this chart, and I have red there because I do not recommend landman. If you want to crack a landman hash, is mode 300, and you use LM on John the Ripper. And this is for net NTLM. If you capture any credentials with a tool like Responder, you would use one of these. And if you try to ASREP roast, you'd use 8200, or excuse me, you'd use one of these, or ASREP roast, excuse me. If you try to ASREP roast, you'd use mode 8200. And if you try to curve roast, you'd use 3100. And these are just some common ones. There are enormous amounts. Actually, I'll just show you. If you go to hashcat.com, if I can just go hashcat examples. There are so many. So this is just like a shortened version, like, of things that I see most commonly. But you could, if I included it all, it would be quite the list. Oh, and they have these dots at the end, and I found that really interesting. So I just suppose that they're for future hashes if Windows decides to get them. Um, and they'll just put them there. So unlike Linux, Windows requires it doesn't store the password in plain text. Even as an administrator, there's no password file that you could just cat out. It stores it in the SAM, and as the system's running, the SAM is encrypted with the system and security registry hives. So that's a problem. That is why tools like Mimikatz exist, to rip credentials out of memory. A tool like Mimikatz wouldn't even make sense on Linux because you would just be able to cat out the password normally. In a domain environment, it's the same kind of thing. All the domain passwords are stored in a file called the ntds.dit. Some people just call it the dit. And within that file is the password hashes for all the users and all their previous users. And the most important component of the ntds.dit is the password hash for the KRBT TGT account. This password hash is basically the shared secret that makes Windows work. And if you compromise this credential, you could tell the domain things that aren't true and it will believe you. Like, I think it doesn't work on the most modern version of Windows, but everything before like the last 2 years, you could just say, hey, I'm user Bob, and Bob doesn't exist in the environment. But as long as it's encrypted with the KRBT TGT account password hash, it's valid. That's kind of crazy. And something else crazy about it is that if you compromise this value, it will be valid until you rotate this value twice. And the reason it is because as you compromise it, the new version has to be rolled out to the environment. And at BHIS, I think our recommendation is you have to rotate it every 6 months. So you would have a full rotation every year. All right. So let's talk about, we mentioned encryption, but let's just try to define some phrases. So encryption is the process of converting plain text into ciphertext that can only be decrypted with the provided key. There's two different types. There's symmetric, which is when the key to unlock is the same key to lock. And there's asymmetric, where the key to lock is not the same as the key to unlock. The problem with encryption, the fundamental problem with encryption, is that key management problem. As I mentioned earlier, if you compromise the keys, you kind of win already. So how can you keep these keys safe? Has been the problem that's like driven cryptanalysts insane for millennia. So we got some examples. We got DES. The original version of DES only had a 56-bit key, so it's considered pretty weak now. But there's a version called triple DES, which is DES 3 times, which is still in use and considered cryptographically secure. There's also AES, which is another symmetric algorithm. There's another block cipher too, as we'll mention later. And they had a competition in the late 90s, I believe, or early 2000s, where they needed a new algorithm. Everyone competed, and this one won out. And RSA is probably the only asymmetric algorithm I mentioned, but it's the one where the key is not the same. The public key, or the one that you share with everyone, is not the same as the private key. Before its adoption, before they created public key encryption, in the 70s, I believe. They would actually have to like hand out like textbooks full of codes, and you would just like try to use the right code for the right day. And hopefully that worked out for you. So with AES encryption, and DES, they're both block ciphers. And I know I didn't explain what that means. And I shall do that now. A block cipher is a cipher where it encrypts blocks of data, as the name suggests. And blocks in AES are 128 bits. So if you give it any file or that's more than 128 bits, and actually there's some like other space restrictions, so it's a little less than that. But if you give it a file less than that, then it would have to use multiple of these blocks. So they've came up with a few modes for encrypting files that aren't the right size, that don't perfectly fit within the size of the block. The first one they came up with was electronic codebook mode. And the idea behind this is pretty simple. I'm just going to encrypt every block with the same key. And the problem with this is it leaves like an imprint of the data. If you look at that image on the screen, that the Linux the Linux penguin, Tux, you can, even if as it was encrypted with AES with a strong key, you can still see the imprint of its data because we shuffle the data in a similar way all over the place. To fix that, they came up with cipher chain blockchaining. And cipher chain blocking is still not recommended. That's why it's in yellow. But it is basically adding XOR and initialization vector and XORing it with every transition. So it is better, but still not ideal. I think the recommended now is the counter modes, and including the one mentioned there, GCM. Sorry, I was like looking at my notes. All right, digital signatures. So I mentioned AES or RSA, and I mentioned there's a public key, which is public, and a private key, which you keep secret. But both keys can encrypt. So what if I did something where I encrypted something with my private key and sent it out to the world? Normally, this is kind of a confusing action to take, because if you encrypt something, and if you encrypt something with your private key, everyone else has your public key. So they would just be able to decrypt it. But in that process, they would know that you were the one who signed it. And that is the foundations of digital signatures. And the application for penetration testers and offensive security is we often take advantage of signed binaries to complete tasks. For example, the Living on the Line binary project is a list of binaries whose functionalities has been documented for solving problems. These, as you can see here, we can actually open it up. Look at it. Where is it? So bits admin is a good one. I use bit admins all the time to download files. So you can go here and it can tell you the command to download files. That's kind of long. But instead of having to download some malware on the system to download a file, you can just use bits admin. There's lots of living off the land binaries. The most popular is PowerShell. Yeah, and it's taking advantage of that signature to solve problems. Well, I have a question. How do you deal with imposters? How do you know my public key is mine? Well, that's where certificates come in. So certificates are run by certificate authorities solve this problem by being the trusted organization that says, hey, I vouch for the authenticity of this public key. This belongs to X or Y or Z. So if I trust it, if I trust the root certificate here, then I also trust the signature that was provided. So I found this pretty cool command on Linux where you can just print out all the names of the trusted certificates on your system, and I thought that was neat. Some of these are corporations, some of these are governments, some of these are all sorts of different things. Can you guys see this? Hopefully this isn't too small. You change the font size. Let's crank that up. Let's go to 20. Oh, geez, that's huge. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I can't. Oh, okay. So you can see all these certificate authorities that are built into my computer, and this is how my computer knows that this padlock that was sent from GitHub.io is legitimate. Traditionally, attackers have used certificate authorities for reconnaissance. So notice the subject alternate names. I can be pretty confident that all those subject alternate names from this certificate from YouTube belong to Google, even though they don't even say anything like Google. Like, what is bdn.dev? It's probably Google. But instead of searching them one at a time, there's a website for it. I'll actually just demo it. There's a website. You just let's put in Black Hills InfoSec, do some recon. And what I'm doing is trying to find certificates that are similar. And I see these other subdomains like files, files again, webmail, VPN, stuff like that. I don't know how small this is. Oh, that's even worse. Oh, geez. Okay, I'm not sure where that went. I lost my mouse. So yeah, that was cert.sh, really useful site to find targets. So that was the main use for certificates in offensive security until 2021. And in 2021, a gentleman named Will Schroeder and Lee Christensen from SpecterOps came out with this paper called Certified Pre-Owned. And they described these escalation paths that you can take advantage of in Windows Active Directory certificate services. There are templates in Active Directory that, if are misconfigured in the right way, can allow you to even become domain admin. So originally, the paper described 8 of these vulnerabilities, but now there are 11 and counting. So the way we're going to focus on one of them just because of the nature of time. So ESC1 has to successfully exploit it, a vulnerable template needs certain qualities. So first, it has to be used for authentication. And ESC1, by the way, just to be clear, it will allow you to go from a regular user to a domain admin in one step. First, it has to allow authentication because you're becoming a domain admin. The certificate has to be enabled. The enrollee has to apply the subject. And right there in the subject is where you tell it that, hey, I'm a domain admin. And then there's also these approval steps like authorized signature and manager approval that you have to go through to check. So if all of these conditions are true, you can go from a normal user to a domain admin in one step. And I believe this is the most common way I've seen at BHIS of us, reaching domain admin. I didn't do any statistical analysis or anything. This is just based off my observation. But this attack and the 11 other attacks that are out there based off of this are taking advantage of the inherent trust we have in certificate authorities. All right, let's talk about TLS, SSL TLS. So this is honestly what inspired this talk. When I was I saw a lot of what we call weak transport layer security vulnerabilities related to websites using deprecated or insecure versions of SSL or TLS. And it's honestly not their fault. So on the right, there's an image that I took this morning of my website, and I didn't do anything about this website. I think I deployed it in like Cloudflare or something. And by default, it enabled some deprecated protocols, TLS1 and TLS1. I didn't do anything, so it just kind of did it. These are deprecated, and there are vulnerabilities for them, but they're in yellow because they're kind of, as far as I can tell, they're impossible to exploit in real-world conditions, just based off of their nature. SSL 2 and 3, the attacks there, drowned in Poodle, I believe, or worse. But yeah, I think best recommendation is TLS 1.2. And you might be like, wait, why not TLS 1.3? Well, this is a really interesting debate that I've seen because of the security community. I feel like in the security community, we're always on the bleeding edge of exploitation. We're always like, hey, let's find the worst vulnerabilities out there, or let's use the best technology out there. The newest version, the latest patches, or whatever it may be, even if the threat is weak. But TLS 1.3 has some features that effectively blind a lot of security monitoring tools, and I've seen it like be shunned, and actually like people have said like you should burn it to the ground. You shouldn't allow it in your enterprise environment. You should use it as an individual. It provides great protection for an individual, but if you have any security monitoring in your environment, like it'll make your life worse. So how can I evaluate the SSL TLS configurations on my website to find out what it did? So that screenshot right there is from Test SSL Labs. Let's see. Let's see. Where's my mouse? Sorry, we're finding the mouse. It's on the other screen. Oh, found it. There it is. Okay. So you can just go to SSL tests, and this is run by Qualys. You can go here and you can put in any website you want. I'm going to put my website, but it's going to probably, if it's not cached, it's going to take forever. Oh, okay. Well, it might be cached. No, still, it's a going. So yeah, it goes in and it tries to authenticate as all of these protocols. And it usually takes a while. Oh, actually, no, it's pretty much done. Oh, it's got the certificate. So this is a certificate probably from Cloudflare. And it goes on and it'll enumerate any vulnerabilities based off of that. But if you have a domain environment with like hundreds of email addresses or hundreds of domain names, like you don't want to do this for every site. That's going to kill you. So we actually have a script called Test SSL, and we have a blog about it. That's a couple of years old. I did not open it in the right place. Let's see, let's copy it, paste it. Right. And this is a couple of years old. You don't have to use a bash loop anymore. You can just give it a file. But you can do this at scale and start seeing, hey, am I using any of the really, really bad stuff? But even if you're not using the really, really bad stuff, you probably want to use TLS 1.1 because of the payment card industry, these security standards. I believe that's the latest guidance from them. It's like 1.1 and above. Where are my slides? All right. All right. So what are my conclusions? Well, you should protect your keys. Cryptography is often, pretty much always a key problem. You should have long 15 plus character and unique passwords for every site to protect yourself online. I think if I was going to give someone one piece of advice to stop themselves from being hacked, it's to have better passwords. You should also monitor data breaches. If a website says, hey, we had a security incident, just go ahead and change your password there. Like, I've never seen it get better. Like, if they said they had a security incident and we have no evidence of any compromise, any customer data, just go ahead, change your password. You'll be way better off. You'll sleep better at night. Use the best cryptography available with the proper configuration. So TLS 1.2, depending on your environment, avoid weak hashing algorithms, avoid weak encryption, and avoid weak modes of these encryptions, like electronic code book mode. But I actually went ahead and made one more thing. I truly believe that cybersecurity is a contact sport. You should get your hands on the keyboard and solve problems as much as you can, and that'll help you improve more than anything. It'll make ideas click in your head. It'll make your life easier. So to that end, I've created a try hacking room for you guys to hang around with and enjoy. It's not complicated. I specifically designed it so that you didn't need a virtual machine You just need a web browser and some Google to solve all the challenges. And the idea behind it is to encourage you to start looking into things. Like look at that Active Directory certificate services or a blog post from a white paper from SpectreOps. Look at the certificates that your websites are issuing. Look at CyberChef, see what it does. So I'll actually show you. And since we have time left, you can go through some of the challenges here. So if you go to this, you can't go to room. You have to go to jr.pineapplepizza at tryhackme.com. You should be able to access this room. I'll try to drop it in the Discord. Actually, I don't have Discord open, unfortunately.
We'll take care of it.
You'll do it? You guys are amazing. So yeah, so I was gonna add the webcast here. You guys are all here, so that's a complete there. Encoding. All right, so base 64 decode the following phrase. So you can copy this value, go off to CyberChef. It's in dark mode still, that's great. And you see the magic there, or you can search it from base 64. Boom, cooking up some answers. Easy, copy it, drop it in, submit. And I've also added some hints. Again, this room is not the most elite room in the world. It wasn't designed to be. I really want, again, the point is to encourage people who've never done it before to try things. Base 64, the following phrase. You can go here, go to CyberChef, clear the recipe, clear the input, paste the new input, and then to base 64. See, that's the recipe. You can just drag it over. And then you can copy it with this little button. Boom, copy it, drop it in there. Submit. All right, we could do some hashing problems too. So submit the MD5 hash of the following phrase. We attack at dawn. So CyberChef also does MD5 hashing. So you could just search MD5. Sweet. Oh, wait, actually, we have the old recipe there. Add the MD5. Add the new phrase. Easy solve. Copy. Paste. Submit. All right. What is the landman hash of nothing? So, and submit it in lowercase. So if you go here, landman, they actually added this pretty recently. I believe in the last year or so. This wasn't in here. So if we just delete everything, we get this AAD3 phrase that I mentioned before. This is the landman hash of nothing. I can also show you the landman hash or the NT hash of nothing. And again, just keeping an eye out of what these look like, because if you see these on a, like I was doing an exam once and I had to get the SAM file and I ran this tool to extract that SAM file and I used this tool to decode it. And it just didn't work. And I knew it didn't work instantly because it showed me all the hashes were empty. So it's something that you should definitely want to keep in mind, like what it looks like. So this is an empty NT hash. And if you forget about it, you just go to CyberChef and find out. So clear input. Let's find that empty NT hash. Whoops. Or LM hash, excuse me. And then it said to lowercase. Guess what? CyberChef has a lowercase option. Big surprise. Copy that over. Paste it in. Crack the following NT hash. So if I'm doing a CTF and it's an NT hash, and I know NT hashes aren't salted, I tend to use websites that like hashes.org or CrackStation to automatically solve it. Let's go to hashes.org. Let's see, do they exist? Let's try CrackStation. CrackStation. So I can pop it in here. And if it's a common password, we'll look it up pretty quickly. This is why salting is important. Crack the hashes. It calls it an NTLM hash. Again, it's not an NTLM hash, it's an NT hash. NTLM is the authentication protocol. But you know, you're just being pedantic at that point. You drop it in, password. Boom. And we also had a hint for that. Encryption. So these questions you have to use some Google for. So what is the name of the often excluded third member of the Diffie-Hellman key exchange? We didn't talk about the Diffie-Hellman key exchange, but it's essentially what lets RSA work. So we can look up the Diffie-Hellman key exchange. Find the Wikipedia page. And let's see if we can find a Merkle in recognition of Yeah, in 2006, they suggested the algorithm called Diffie-Hellman-Merkle, and no one has followed that advice. Let me drop that. What government organization was the first to develop public key encryption? So this was a neat fact that I learned. So we think that public key encryption was Diffie-Hellman and Merkle, Diffie-Hellman, Merkle, and the people who were behind RSA. But it turns out the GCHQ, the British military, was way ahead of them. So I believe, look at history. GCHQ. Okay, yeah, classified discovery. You see that the GCHQ conceived of a non-secret encryption, but couldn't see a way to implement it. And later they were able to add it. And they actually shared it with the NSA. So that's kind of, I thought this was a neat piece of trivia that shows you like, hey, who knows what crazy stuff private government organizations are working on as we speak. We drop the GCHQ in there. Let's look at signatures. So paste in the full public key from blackhills.com. So we got to go to blackhills.com. Got to look at the certificate. You click this little lock icon. Connection secure. You find some more information. Just view the certificate. And you can see that public key value. Now, unfortunately, this problem will probably change in like May 2022. So in a couple of months. So I probably have to go back and update this because there'll probably be a new certificate by then. But this is the public value. And this is the chain of trust. So it looks like it stems from Baltimore, it goes to Cloudflare, and then the trust extends to Black Hills. So if I trust this root certificate, which is probably on my system, then I trust that this is blackhillsinformationsecurity.com. So I paste that giant value in here. Paste, nice. And then this is like a fill in the blank question. With digital signatures, the blank key encrypts the message and the public key decrypts it. So this is the private key. So it's backwards from what we normally expect. Boom, there's that. And then who is the largest certificate authority in the world? So who's the person out there that's issuing, who's the most trusted? So I just Googled this. Let's look up largest. This is IdenTrust. I've never heard of them before. Apparently they have almost domination of the market, like 43%, 44% almost. So that's neat. And then how many escalation paths were described in the original 2021 certified pre-owned white paper? So if you click that, it will open up the white paper. And we can scroll down. And we can start to see how many they described. So these are, hey, you can steal some things with these thefts. You can persist with these attacks. And then these are the escalations. So we got ESC1, ESC through 2, and then it seems to end at 8. So let's 8. Boom. And we solved the room. We got the confetti. That is about it. We have about 10 minutes. I know I have a show right after this, so I was trying to be more conservative on my time.
You did great.
Oh, it's very nice.
Hey, first time.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone. This was Ayub's first time giving a webcast. So if you would like to see a future webcast from Ayub, let us know in the Discord server.
Yes.
I mean, it would be weird if you're like, nah. Like,
No.
oh, okay.
Screw that guy.
I haven't thought about asking a yes/no question.
We want honesty.
Yeah.
Yes, great.
Yeah. Ayub goes by White Cyberduck on the internet. So if you go ahead and tag him, then he'll get hundreds of notifications. Plus, we can all see the haps, claps, and everything going up on. Well done, Ayub. Didn't really have that many questions going through, but here's the one thing I really liked about your presentation. I loved that you walked through a CTF at the end. Because I think there's some people here that have heard of CTFs, they've considered CTFs, but they've never actually decided to go to the CTF page and actually submit an answer and do it. And so I think you just showed people what a CTF looks like and how to answer the questions. And so I'm going to do something that I wasn't planning to do. So once you all figure, just talk amongst yourselves. Kelly, Deb, ask Ayub questions. I'm going to go find a thing. I'm going to give it to all 600 people here, and then let's see what happens.
Oh,
Okay.
that's
Just
exciting.
going
I've
off
got a
trail.
question.
Yes.
How did you get so interested in cryptography? This is more than just a day job here.
Mm.
So, like I said, I saw a lot of these in our reports, and it was something I don't come from a math background. I was a poli-sci major, so it kind of intimidated me, especially if you see like the weird formulas and stuff on the internet. So I was like, you should move towards the stuff that scares you a little bit. I think that's a great way to grow. Not like bears and stuff, but like like, oh, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to like snowboard. You should go snowboard. It'll be fun.
Bears.
Yeah, not bears. Don't do that.
Yeah.
That's a good fear.
Rabid
That's a good
ducks.
fear.
Okay. Jason, you got a thing? Are we still
Oh
talking?
yeah. Just I'm putting it in the announcements channel on Discord, and so if you're in Zoom right now, I'll figure out a way to give it to you in Zoom too. But for everyone, it's about to show up in the announcements channel here on Discord.
Okay.
Well,
Sweet.
Ayub, I really liked your answer there because I totally agree with you. Risk reward. And the more risk we take, the more we learn, the more we do more fun things, the more adventures we have, and the more memories we have. So that was a great answer. I really like that.
Oh, should I share this with other servers?
Yeah,
No.
always yes.
No.
Yeah.
Nope. All right. So if you are currently here, if you go to the announcements, and I'll just tag it right here. If you go to the announcements channel, you'll see that there's a link to a meta CTF. And some of you may have seen this in the past webcast, like a while ago. If you go to this link, metactf/mini-zine, and then put in the word mixed, and if you solve 5 of the 6 challenges, you'll get 1 free month of access to the entire anti-siphon cyber range. And so if you do that,
Good memories.
Hey, we do have a question from the audience.
Yeah.
Just Ben is asking Ayub, what are your thoughts on quantum computing rendering current encryption useless, and where do we see cryptography after quantum? Da, 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 dum.
Ooh, quantum. So, I have no idea. We don't know yet. We don't know if it's even possible. We've seen some movement in that direction, but essentially, it does break the web as we know it. There've been websites and protocols that have been pushed out that are seen to be more quantum resistant or secure, but we don't know yet. Again, we might end up in a situation where we're pre-RSA, so before the RSA encryption algorithm, you'd have to transfer out your keys publicly. And I believe the threat from quantum encryption is more towards the asymmetric side than the symmetric side. But again, don't quote me on that. I'm not a mathematician.
Who really is, honestly? Well, there are people who are good at math. So, Ayub, do you have any good books you recommend to folks, or
Yes. So I read one. Hold up.
just one?
I did read. No, I read snippets. But I did read one that I think really captured. Let me figure out how to. I'll be right back.
Be right back.
well, he's gone. So that was metactf.com/mini, MINI dash zine, ZINE.
So I read this. This was recommended by a friend, and she was like, "You should read this." And I was like, "Cool." And I really loved it because it turned cryptography, instead of like a bunch of math, into the story of people. So it opens up with talking about like, hey, this is Queen Mary of Anne, I believe, and she, and the story of her trying to use encryption, thinking it's secure, but it being broken due to techniques like frequency analysis. So Queen Mary of Scots, that's her name. So it's a really great book. I would recommend it. I actually made sure I finished it before this talk. I only realized at the end that it came out in the 90s because they were talking about like the newfangled internet or something. And I was like, wait a minute.
What's the name of the book again?
Oh, it is The Code Book.
The Code Book.
Yes.
That does look like a good book.
Yeah, it's a beautiful cover. Again, it doesn't look like it's from the 90s.
We have another question for you here.
Ooh.
What is your favorite resource for learning about and understanding encryption?
Favorite resource? I like videos. I feel like encryption is one of those things that if you see it work, it makes more sense. Like looking at the Enigma machine in a picture book makes less sense to me than seeing it move, if that makes any sense. Like seeing the
Sure
rollers
does.
move. Like, oh, so I would recommend videos, number of files, and or computer files. They both had a lot of videos of cryptography that I referred to, that I thought were really good.
One of our friends in Discord said, when I've got encryption questions, I ask Bob or Alice. That's really funny.
Yes. For those who don't know, Bob and Alice are like the titular example characters. And there's also Eve who's in the middle watching, or trying to watch at least.
Hey, we got time for one last thing. So the try to hack me, do they need to have a paid account for that to work, or is it just
No,
work?
so I made sure I don't even have a paid account. And one of the reasons I didn't pay for an account was to make sure that no one needed a paid account. If you register for an account, you can enjoy it. It's a free platform. And I did test it out. Graham Helton and Lily Clark were my guinea pigs, and they were wonderful, and they made sure it worked.
Awesome. All right, Ayub, this is we're gonna wrap up here, and then if you're joining us for the second webcast, we're gonna leave here, like leave this, and then we go back to the lobby, and then we join the second webcast. So it doesn't just transfer over. You have to leave here, go back to the lobby, and join the second one.
Yes.
All right. So Ayub, we asked this question to everyone that does a webcast. If you could sum up everything today with one last thing for people to learn, what would it be?
So cryptography has honestly been the technology that has enabled like digital commerce and the internet we know of today. And it's always under threat. There are governments that do not like the fact that they can't read your mail, or will tell you that they have to read your mail, because bad people will also use the same tools to protect their mail. And I just have never followed that example. Like people used to have more privacy, and the world was fine. So protect your cryptography, just as you should protect your keys.
Thank you, Ayub, and thank you for giving your first webcast. Like,
You did great.
I know it. There's like that fear leading up to it, and like you got your nerves and all that stuff. And so, thank you for overcoming. Thank you for overcoming any possible imposter syndrome you felt to show up here today and do this. And we appreciate you being a part of the Black Hills team, because you are doing great work. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, everybody else. What happened is, if you are here and you haven't checked in yet on Discord by saying something like book it or something like that, so that we could credit you for being here today, we're saying if you reach 10 webcasts, we're going to give you something for free. We're figuring out what that free thing is, and someone potentially will reach their 10th webcast today. And if you're like, I've attended hundreds of webcasts, what are you talking about? Well, we didn't start keeping track until about 10 weeks ago. And so for us to go back and try to do it retroactively was insane and impossible.
We discussed it, and we decided not to. Yes.
So if you're not on Discord, well, we can't quite do that because this is the way that we keep track. And here's why, right? Like, Discord is an opportunity for you to connect with other people who are information security professionals, who are like-minded, who love to come to webcasts. And so since you already have that in common, there's a chance you have other things in common. And so with that, you can become good friends. And once you become good friends, well, then you got all the...
Your life is better, right?
Yeah. No more lonely days.
No
All right.
more
So what
lonely days.
we're going to do is we're going to end this webcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. The Black Hills Information Security webcast. We're going to go back to the lobby, and then we're going to go to the second webcast, where we have a team of people waiting in the back end, getting ready to talk about the InfoSec Survival Guide. So thank you for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you at the next one. If not, we'll see you at the next webcast next week. Bye.
Thank you.